Okay, so we're live. Welcome back to the Magic Minds podcast. I'm Matt Burke. On the show today, we are located in the Liberties. I'm at the back of my flats. This is the Liberties. I decided that we're going to do the podcast from a different location. Why not use my area? You know, everyone knows that I love the Liberties. Everybody knows that I love where I'm from. So I just thought, I'd get out of the house. I'll do something different. I'm always trying to do something different. So we've decided that we're going to do our videos from different locations. So today we're located at the Tree of Hope. It's a tree that was planted here in aid of people that have died by suicide. The Shannon Hope line, Mental Health Warriors were huge players in getting this done here. I think Sandra and Lisa, got in contact with the guys. They have a Facebook page about getting it planted around the time that I think it was around a year after the anniversary of Shannon passing away. So yeah, it's an absolutely brilliant idea. It's kind of in memory of people that have died by suicide, but it's also a place to come and be at peace. And I do often sit out here myself sometimes, and it's just absolutely lovely. So so this is where I come from, the Liberties of I grew up here. It's absolutely fantastic. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, by the way. It's the only opportunity I could get. It's quite busy. You probably hear the seagulls and crows screaming in the background. But sure, look, we'll give it a bash. The sound mightn't be the greatest in the world, but we'll give it a go. It's nuts. Like, this is a million miles away from what I have ever did before. A year ago, I'd have never done videos. Now I'm doing videos. I'm doing uploads on Facebook and Instagram Live. It's all part of... I decided a year ago that I would do things I've never did before, and I'd record them. And that's what I do now. So this is just one of those things. What I do is I try to do something different every month. I keep a note in my book. Every month I list all the things I've never did before. Just simplistic things. But we've built up to it now. I'm doing podcast interviews, podcast videos out on the street, podcast live, all that kind of stuff. Just trying to do something different, novelty all the time. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. Like, what am I doing at the moment? I'm going to an acting class. I decided to go to an acting class. This week is the second week of it. It's an acting / drama workshop. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. It's embarrassing. It's difficult. It's great crack, but it really pushed me out of my comfort zone, and I suppose it helped me with this as well. People mightn't think, but sometimes I don't like attention. I don't like affirmation. I don't like people saying lots of things. So I get embarrassed, but so things like that help me. This kind of helped me, but it's all in service of the podcast. It's all in service of pushing us forward. You have to have a face. If you want to get attention for a podcast, we have to be active. We have to be live on Facebook. We have to be live on Instagram. And a year, 2 years ago, I'd have absolutely cringed at that, but it's what we have to do to try get our promotion for our podcast. The way I see it, it's not for me, it's for the podcast. It's not for me, it's in service of the amazing interviews that we've done. Just take a little pause there. Cars are driving by. Mindful of the sound. So yeah, that's the kind of thing. I just push myself out and learning to promote the podcast. Yeah, it's all in service of the podcast. So hopefully we're doing a good job. I have my notes here. Normally don't have notes, but I said just because the environment and we're switching up a little bit, I take a few notes. So what are we up to at the moment? Yeah, the interview with Fran. How apt is this? Last week interviews with Fran. His son died by suicide. I'm delighted with the response from our community, from the people that got in touch. It was really well received, and rightly so. He's an absolute legend. The family is brilliant. He really is, and so is Ryan, a superhero. It was amazing to have him on the podcast, and I'm glad so many people liked it. Excuse me. So, who was on the podcast this week? Dr Treasa Kenny. Dr Treasa Kenny. She's a lady that works with me in the hospital. She's also a lecturer in Maynooth College, mediation. She's somebody that comes in. She just does kind of consultancy work. Comes into the hospital and works with. She's part of a group called the PWEG group, Positive Work and Environment Group. That's what we run the hospital. She comes in and chairs that. She's absolutely fantastic. She's kind of like the peace in the middle of a storm. She just kind of oozes fairness, equality, love, kindness, and then she does it all with a great bit of crack. And we kind of go through that in the podcast. We talk about, the groups that she works at, the work that she does, how she got started. It's absolutely brilliant, So yeah, look, have a listen to it. Let us know what you think. As always, just saying hello to somebody one boy that walks his dog. He goes by at the same time every day. That's the thing about the Liberty. You see the same people. Everyone says hello. Everyone's friendly. It's just an amazing area. So look, have a listen to the show. Let us know what you think. She's an absolute legend, Treasa Kenny. With some cracking interviews coming up. Brian Peters, Atuli Mitra. I'm hoping, as I say, get my mate on to talk about himself and his missus process of going through IV. So that's what we've got coming up the next few weeks. The podcast is really after picking up momentum. We're getting loads of lovely feedback about it. It's deadly. So as always, I thank Noel Riley from Rudy Media. They do amazing work with graphic design. If you need any graphic design stuff, get in touch with them. The show notes, as always, slow down a bit. Their contact details is always at the end of our show notes. Also, the Shannon Hope line, doing amazing work in the Liberties, mental health awareness, suicide prevention, education for the area, for youths, low price counselling. If that's something that you need, get in contact with them, get in contact with us. Who else? As always, please share on social media. Please share with your family and friends. Send us your feedback. We really need that, and we love it. We're on iTunes, YouTube, all the podcast servers across the way. So that's it. That's our first outdoors intro. I'm going to do it from different locations. I'm going to do it down in Grey Street. Guinness is at the back of me. There's some amazing places, and I want to try show you the Liberties, show you a little bit of history about it. I grew up here, as I say. I used to work down on Meath Street. I used to work in the butchers on Meath Street. Meat Place Flats. Brendan Fricker just lives at the end of the road here. The place is just absolutely full with talent, and I just love it. It's an amazing place, and hopefully I can get to show you different places. As always, mind your little self, take care of yourself, practice self-compassion, so you can then be more compassionate to the rest of the world. So there you go. Welcome to the Liberties, and hope to see you all soon. Enjoy the podcast. Let us know what you think. Dr. Treasa Kenny. Thank you. Okay, so we're live. Hi. Welcome back to the Magic Minds podcast. I'm Matt Burke. On the show today, I'm joined by Dr. Treasa Kenny. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you very much indeed, Matt. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, it's brilliant. I've been trying to get you on for a long time. We're so close with work and all that, and the PWEG group was like, I'll come back to you, because I knew you'd be there. But I was always excited to sit down and have the chats with you. So guys, I've asked Treasa to come on the show because Treasa is the academic program coordinator and lecturer at Maynooth College. Am I right?
At Maynooth University, yes, and Edward M. Kennedy Institute for Conflict Intervention. There's a big, long title.
So that's the KIWMRG.
Well, that would be a research group that's part of that, yeah. So,
I have a bit of a gripe. I read somewhere that you bring them in baking.
I do.
And you feed them.
I do.
We're just been out of PWEG. You didn't bring me any cakes. I feel like the unloved child. What happened there?
No, I'm sorry about that now, Matt. That's ever since the PhD, when it got into its kind of final throes, the baking went out the window. Even the poor old sort of Kennedy Institute research group found themselves abandoned, with no cakes. So
she said someone wrote that you're feeding her endeavours. I was like, I never got any cakes. I went straight into my child. I was like the trigger child. I wasn't loved. I wasn't treated well.
Well, next meeting.
Next meeting, cakes. Right, cakes. Okay. Give us a little bio on yourself, on your awesome, wonderful self.
On my awesome, wonderful self. You're taking back as far as you like there now. Well, I'm born in Ireland. I was one of those immigrants as a 12-year-old who went to live in London with my family. So I literally did, I lived over there for a good number of years. So I did my kind of secondary education and then went on to do my kind of secretarial that's the way I trained, went into work, and then worked for different types of organisations. I often think about it a bit like the Three Bears. I started off with a really big one like Unilever, and which was great and a fascinating kind of experience. At the tender age of about 24, I think I said something to them like, I'd really like to think about what I'd like to do next in terms of work, and they said, come back when you're 26, 27, and I kind of thought, oh, okay. So then I went to work for what I would call Baby Bear, which was a very small construction business.
Baby Bear.
Yeah, but it was just the way I kind of saw it, that it was a very small place, and it was incredible because I got to work with kind of people in the construction manufacturing. So you had this kind of head office manufacturing kind of factory base in the Midlands in England, and that was fascinating. And then I went to work for Mammy Bear, which was a medium-sized, but is now one of the big kind of, it's now Deloitte and Touche, but I worked for the management consultancy there. And that's when I kind of moved from being a PA, a secretary, personal assistant, to waking up one morning and going, hey, I know what I want to do. And I wanted to go into human resource management, which my boss at the time just looked at me and said, you're off your head. This thing is just boring. It's just admin. It's, it's not where you want to be. You want to get into marketing. You want to get into something, much better than HR. And and then after a little conflict, little negotiation, it was eventually a job was scoped, which essentially was the job I went into. So I started going to college and studying and getting involved in HR. But I suppose my big thing about it was the people, because again, one of the things for me was that, I noticed that even in all the organisations I worked in, it all came down an awful lot of the time to the relationships between people. It came down to people judging that some people were better than other people because of the role they had, or assumptions about their education, or these kinds of things. And so that's the way I wanted to do it, was actually to do it with people. So that's essentially, I started down that particular path, and fairly rapidly would have found myself in a situation where people would come and sort of say, look, there's a problem or there's a difficulty, can you help us sort it? And so, with no training, by the way, in conflict, because most HR people would find themselves being trained to negotiate with unions, but not necessarily to deal with anything else in the way of conflict with people, other than the policies and the procedures, so it's all quite formal. So I just started to kind of find myself kind of going between groups of people, carrying what people were saying was important to them to senior managers and back again, and trying to get people to sit down and talk to one another. And then by the time I left there, I went into the NSPCC, which is the National Society for Financial Cruelty to Children. And so that was like a complete sort of spin on its head, because I went from a big financial services organisation with a lot of money, and inequalities in all kinds of interesting ways, and finding it very difficult to cope with the first IT people coming in, because they wore sandals and had beards, which was really kind of, so you're kind of talking about a particular point in time. And then, and so I found that really opened my eyes, because I had felt things about fairness and equality between people, but when I went into the NSPCC, I really got not a baptism of fire, but it certainly sort of felt like an awakening in a way that was really considerable around organisations that were working sort of, in areas that were very complicated, also trying to raise money in those areas, trying to spend the least they could on the administration of what they were doing, and needing their people. And again, a big part of it was to actually, so hear people out, and I would have been involved with equality and as well as negotiation through really substantial change and very difficult change for the organisation. So so that was sort of my forming there, and then I came back to Ireland. So
where did this epiphany come from? How did you wake up one day and decide this is what I want to do? How did that happen? Was it literally like that?
It felt like that, yeah, because I was struggling with what I wanted to do, and I kept having these kind of strange conversations with myself and with anybody who would listen about, there's more I can do. And I had managed to kind of, as my boss at the time sort of said to me, he asked me a question one day, which was, when did you stop being my PA? And I kind of looked at him and I said, well, I am still your PA. He said, no, in name you are my PA. He said, but there is someone else who does my secretarial work. He said, you organise conferences, you kind of, produce a newsletter, you bring me kind of indicators of priorities I need to concentrate on. You remind me to go and talk to certain people about things. You remind me, he said, to do things for people in a different way.
Wow.
And so I think, that conversation, and then I was weighing up back and forwards, and then it just felt like that to me. It felt like I woke up one morning and went, it's the people, actually. That's what I want. That's what I want. And I've had a kind of, just a saying that I carried around, which actually is at the front of a book by Ian Foster, and it's used in Educating Rita. So that's the first time I was studying the book, Howard's End, in college. I'd gone back to a night class for English, and we went to see Educating Rita, which was just amazing, because it was kind of like, that went on to become the film and everything. But in that, at the beginning of that book, it says only connect. And I think, for me, that whole series of things, it was, how do you connect in work? You connect with and through people, and that became it for me. And so even when I was challenged about going into HR and told go into marketing, my cheeky response at the time was, well, surely your greatest marketing resource are the people who work for you. To which my boss at the time had no answer. So,
I can see why he said that to you about going on and doing greater things and become marketing, because you have this magnetic personality.
Oh, well,
you tell stories. You're very articulate. You it's very genuine. So I think whatever you would have moved into, you would have been great.
Thank you.
So I can see where he was. It's mad, isn't it? When people make assumptions, this would be best for you, and he wasn't listening or observing all the things you say and do, and the language and the direction you are pointing yourself.
Yeah. And again, I think it's one of those, isn't it, that bit when your gut tells you that this is the right thing for me? And I suppose that's where I was sitting with it, because I was prepared to leave the organisation, which was really hard for me, because I really, really enjoyed working with the people I worked with there. I really enjoyed it. I liked the organisation a lot. And it really would have been a very tough decision to go from there. And it felt like absolutely the right path for me. Now, the only thing I can say to you as a laugh was, a few years later, that same man came into my office where I was HR manager there, and he said to me, I've been offered a new job in the internet, like as a global company, a global business, and he'd been offered this kind of, senior global kind of position as a director of the overall organisation. And I said, that's fantastic. I said, what are you gonna do? And he said, I'm going to become HR director. And I burst out laughing. And I just kind of said to him, well, that's a dead-end job. And he just started laughing. And he said, but isn't it funny? He said, sometimes you get shown that things are not all you think they are, and it just made me really kind of laugh, because he was a great guy. And, one of his things was that, he had this, he had made a decision about what was best, and he thought was best, and he did it from the very best of places as well.
It's mad. I got recommendations from the CEO here to do. I was talking about leadership and going on to do a course, and he was making recommendations to do another course. But I kind of had it in my heart that I wanted to go and do this one, and I did. And it was one of the greatest things I ever did, because it was person centered. It was leadership. It was communication. But it was all about me. It wasn't me being the manager of a lot of people. It was me being the manager and the leader of me.
Yeah, which is, I think, the most powerful thing, because that's integrity, isn't it? I mean, that's intrinsic to us, that if we can manage ourselves, if we can lead ourselves, if we have a good idea about what matters to us and what's important to us, then we don't get all het up when people challenge that. I mean, because we can sit with that and kind of say, it's okay. I mean, you see it a different way. That's okay. You want me to be a different type of person. Let's talk about that, and let's talk about what you need and why that's important to you. And I think that can only come from leadership that is where people understand themselves first, and can actually kind of see the impact they have then on others, because they don't get precious about things, and we don't feel kind of threatened by other people.
Absolutely. Can we talk about mediation? Conflict intervention. We first came to me a couple of years ago when I was only starting off in the organisation, and you came to do a bit of mediation in our organisation. I found that really difficult. I find conflict, I find mediation. I did back then. I found it really difficult. Can you share us a bit about that? About just conflict and mediation in general?
Yeah.
Why people find it so difficult?
I think conflict is really difficult because it's talked about so often as a negative a negative thing. You know, we should be better than that. You know, we should be able to. It's all the shoulds. You see, up here, that's kind of like, you know, there's all these kind of strange.
The tyranny of should.
Yeah, and it's so powerful, you know, and it's sort of like, you know, that if you were a better person, you wouldn't be in conflict with people. If they were a better person, there wouldn't be conflict, you know, and very often it becomes about that, you know, that it's if someone else did something different, I wouldn't be experiencing this difficulty that I'm experiencing now. And so I think conflict gets a lot of bad press. I think it gets talked about very negatively. I don't think we often talk about the creative power of conflict, you know, that if we can actually bring people together to talk about what the differences are, and obviously depending on the extent of the conflict, you know, so if that's two people, that may be a short enough conversation. If it's a group of people, it may be a slightly longer conversation, but not necessarily. If it's two countries or two parts of a country or two parts of a community, it may be a longer conversation that needs to be happening with people in order to talk about in the first instance what it is. And the storytelling is really important, I think, in conflict, because we hide it. You know, I think that's another thing with conflict. It's kind of, it's hidden away. It's hidden away in procedures. It's hidden away in almost like creating these kind of weird caves people have to find their way into. You know, if you want to sort out a conflict.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
You have to kind of go into the cave and you have to kind of put your hand up and say, hello, I'm not coping, or I'm not dealing with this very well, or maybe there's something wrong with me, or people get really kind of so distressed by not being able to find a solution to the conflict and any help to it, that maybe they lose the head and they go in and they shout and they scream and they...
Absolutely, and I find a lot of people don't use I. You know, I feel shit. There's all these point one fingers, three pointing back at you. As I remember back to that conflict, I was only having a conversation with someone yesterday about it. I found it really difficult because I wanted to be as honest as I could. I wanted everyone to put their cards on the table. But back then I was thinking they're not being honest. But they probably had their insecurities. They probably had their, looking back now, but back then I was really not angry, but I was like, oh, come on, let's be honest and just clear the board here. We'll talk about what needs to be talked about. But they didn't and they couldn't. And I'm sure I was a contributing factor to that. You know, they perceived and I perceived, and it was all this.
Yeah, and that's so much of it, you know, that different values, different feelings of security. You know, I probably learned a huge amount even in that time since we would have met then about how I would do things. Some things the same, some things very differently to working with conflict, because I think, you know, that's one of the things I find about having gotten involved in the mediation area is I'm working with people when the distress, Matt, you know, of sitting in conflict, of even what you're describing, you know, where you want to say your truth to people and you want people to know and get it and then move forward. And for other people, they're really struggling with remaining nice, or, you know, not seeming to be difficult, or, you know, and they want harmony, and harmony feels like it should all be terribly sort of sweet and nice. And yet, you know, there is that whole bit about how do we get to a place of harmony for everybody, and often we have to travel some pretty rocky roads. We have to hear some things that are uncomfortable to hear, and we have to also say some things that are uncomfortable to say.
You even saying that to me, I'm like, oh, that's it. Oh, jeez. And I didn't know back then that I had difficulty with conflict. I had difficulty with saying exactly what I wanted. I had difficulty around having difficult conversations or strong conversations with women. I felt threatened. I felt inadequate. There was lots of things now looking back that I have challenges of having conflicts or saying exactly what I want. And even back then, I probably wouldn't been as professional as I should have been, because I came from a building site or a door job or a butcher's. So I didn't know what the etiquette was. So I had all these insecurities. So I brought it to the table. But yeah, I wanted all these people to be honest with me. But I didn't even know what I wanted, and I was sitting down. And that's how complex conflict can be, can't it?
It is that complex. And that's one of the reasons why I am so profoundly interested in mediation and in restorative practice, restorative justice, you know, conversations where even the most tricky and difficult of things can be talked about in an environment where people can trust that they will get voice, and they're going to be heard in that environment, even if people don't like what they're saying, that they're able to speak. Other people hear it. whether they can make the change. They need to make that's something then to tease through in terms of, well, yeah, it's just it's a much more powerful process than so many of the things we do with conflict. You know, we put them into the courts, or we put them into procedures which are formalized, and everybody writes things down, and everybody goes hunting down people to support their view of the world, and then everything becomes invested in proving that what happened for you or what you perceive to be the way of things.
I'm right, you're wrong.
Absolutely. So it's all about that sort of, it's so focused on the kind of the win-lose all of the time. And it's not that procedures are not important. It's simply that, isn't there something we can do that enables people to talk with one another as well? You know, that whether that's, you know, pre going into something formal or afterwards, when things need to be restored, when relationships need to be restored, because maybe it wasn't as black and white as everybody thought. So mediation can be really helpful in restoring relationships, but equally it can be really helpful early on in talking through what's going on here. You know, what's actually happening. What is it that is uncomfortable for you? Or, you know, so what's your story in this? What's your experience in this?
Yeah.
What's the other person's experience in this? Can you hear each other? And, you know, the number of times I've had people kind of say, I didn't experience it that way, but I can kind of see how you might have thought that. You know, or I didn't mean it that way. And then as a mediator, you know, our role isn't to direct people and say, well, I have an answer to your problems. I can now solve and resolve your problem for you. It's really to catch what people are saying and make sure it's being heard. It's to help people to hear it in a way that words, toxic words, don't get in the way. Or, you know, it's to allow people to express emotion, because we're human. It's a human to human engagement, which is so important for people. And then to look at, well, what do people need? You know, if this is going to work now, what do people need? You know, and even when I would work with separating couples, for example, you know, one of the big things there is I'm not there as someone to get them back together again. You know, even though in my heart sometimes I kind of think, once they start talking honestly with one another, I think, oh wow, isn't this? It's just beautiful that they can talk so honestly with one another. But my role is to ensure that, one, they fairly, for them, kind of distribute the assets they've accumulated in their relationship in one level, and where they have children, that they can co-parent and renegotiate that relationship with one another to allow them to give their children the very best. And that's what the way I would work in workplaces as well, is how can people, by moving beyond that conflict and renegotiating with people about what's okay and what's not okay, and what's reasonable to expect and what's not reasonable to expect, and what are we prepared to give a go to here?
Yeah.
You know, and maybe we don't quite trust one another, but then maybe we could put in place an agreement between us that we'll come back in a couple of months and we'll have a chat again, and we'll see how do we get on. And when you see people do that as well, that's very powerful. You know?
You're just telling me a story here, and I'm nearly having body, and I'm like, yeah, okay. See,
that's what you're coming with me.
Yeah, you're like, I was like, yeah, okay. I'm like a nodding dog in the back of the car. Yeah, I'm okay. And I'm like, I'm not in a conflict, man. Calm down, you're doing an interview here. What the? That's where I say that you have this magnetic pull. I'm like, okay. Can you give us a little insight to some of the cohorts of people that you deal with on a regular basis, and kind of the challenges that they face when it comes to conflict, mediation, intervention?
So I suppose I deal with sort of probably a few different kind of groups of people. So predominantly my practice work. So I call myself something called a pracademic, which is not my word.
I couldn't understand. I was like, pracademic, and then I went like, I couldn't figure it out. I read
it.
It's
a word that comes from a guy who works in with the Harvard program on negotiation. And I read an article of his that he wrote back in 2015, and I loved that because it was about holding practice and academia together, you know, so that we could do teaching and research, and engaging with students, and we could actually stay rooted in practice. So not that I can theorize about being in conflict or in a mediation, but I actually put myself in there and I do it for real, and I stay fresh, you know, I stay realizing the challenges that are there. So I would work predominantly with people in workplace situations. So a lot of the work that I would do would be around that. And that could be anything from, a senior group of people who, you know, something has happened and the relationships have, you know, people are still functioning because they function and they know themselves that it's not it's not working. It's not working with a level of trust that is important, and would honour the people who work with them. Because I think again, when senior people realise that actually they're struggling, they also often realise that the impact that's happening on the people. It often takes a bit of time, and usually a few people highlighting to them that you need to sort this out. And so I would work with senior people. I would work with two colleagues who have started to make assumptions about one another or seeing the world a different way, and sit down with them to look at, well, what's needed here. Bullying and harassment, where somebody has felt very bullied by the behaviour of another feels discriminated against in some way by another. So there would certainly be those conversations as well through mediation that would happen. And I've also been involved in work where whole organisations, or people at certain levels in them, begin to have restorative conversations. So, that's in the public record that, myself and some of my colleagues, some of them from the Glencree Centre for Peace and Reconciliation, others from Restorative Practice Ireland, others from the Mediation Institute of Ireland, we came together, we offered our services to the guards, in fact, at one point, because we were really concerned, before the new commissioner came in, and that there was real struggles there for people there, and so we would have offered the opportunity to engage in conversation, and that would have been, so again, those kind of cohorts of where people are sort of struggling with change, where they're struggling with behaviour, where they're struggling with the difficulties of trying to fit into everybody's expectations and feeling like they're failing to meet any of them, or being beaten up for what they're doing. I get involved in that, and then I would be part of, again, within the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for Conflict Intervention, very long title, so EMKI, let's go with that. Again, we would have our students, so we would have a certificate in restorative practices. So there we might have people who are working in hubs for people who are homeless. There might be people who are working in the prison service. There could be people working in city regeneration projects who really want to be able to have the tools and techniques to sit down and engage everybody who needs to be part of the conversation respectfully in those conversations. And so that's a fabulous program, and the students are just an amazing kind of group of people. We also have a diploma in mediation and negotiation conflict intervention, and again, that's a grouping of people often who are either thinking that they would like to be better at dealing with conflict in their own work. So there could be people from hospitals, there could be people from schools, there could be people from health services, all manner of areas. There could be other people who are thinking, I'd like to do this. I'd like to have this as more as part of the work I do. And so they're looking maybe at beginning to reshape a career in some way. And so they're wonderful people as well, because you're literally coming from all kinds of areas. You're sort of, and through both of those programs, you're seeing people kind of grow in their own understanding of how they, like you were saying with leadership, how they respond to conflict. What are the things they need to unlearn? The habits they need to kind of recognise they have, the assumptions they make about people, and then our master's programs and postgraduate programs, really important as well. But with all of our programs, the grounding. So with our masters, for example, so I get to meet amazing people who come in, and for the month of September, over the days of the study, they're coming from all walks of life, every colour, every creed, every age. They come into a space together, and last year we had 24 people across that spectrum, some of them going on then to do international peace building, security and development, which is another program we have, others mediation and conflict intervention, and they learned how to mediate. So they learned about conflict, they learned about their responses to conflict, they learned how to sit in space with people, to listen, and to actually use all of the other skills of mediation and to do that. So that's a whole cohort of people, and I would work with them in terms of doing research, of trying to build bridges to make sure we're really strongly linked to the practitioner community, that they're doing real research where they're doing research that matters, opportunities to go out and mediate with people. So again, the relationships, the connection of people together is really important. And then I would be involved in other dialogues then. So, our area is involved in dialogues where there would be people coming from, travelling together from Israel and Palestine to come and understand the Irish peace process. So
Wow.
they would come and we would sit in as part of some of those conversations. We would have people from within the sort of loyalist and sort of Republican communities, sort of nationalist communities in the north of Ireland who, you know, will come for conversations, you know, even among themselves because it's about peace building in that sense. And then on the mediation sort of side, we also facilitate a Garda traveller dialogue. So and have been doing that for a while. And in fact, you know, they're very important conversations where members of the travelling community get to sit down with serving guards and get to know one another, get to talk about the types of issues that they arise between them, get to kind of, I suppose, blast away some of the stereotypes that are there, and look at having a plan and a development. And you know, there's a very powerful service within Ireland. When you ask me about mediation, I mean, there are really powerful mediation services in Ireland. You know, there are community mediation services in you know, South Dublin. There's community mediation in Coolock. You know, there's other community services, Ballymun. You know, out around the country. You know, the Limerick. You know, it's amazing. It's just they're fabulous. There's people volunteering to work with members of the community where there might be antisocial behaviour issues, where there might be separation, you know, families, all of these things that are so important to have people sit and be helped to sit together to work out what is the best way of dealing with this that they can commit to, you know, in order to allow it to be lived in their community. So the volunteers who work in that are all trained and accredited to the same level, you know, that I would be, in the sense, you know, in mediation in the institute. So there's a Mediation Institute of Ireland, but they would be certified members, you know. I'm one step on because I'm older and longer in the tooth, and that's all that is. But fabulous community services, and the Traveller Mediation Service is a fabulous service that has gone from not existing to being a service where there are training of people within the traveller community in how to understand the habitual approach perhaps to dealing with conflict, which has tended sometimes towards a more violent, that's what we see, isn't it, a more violent response, that feels more threatening to perhaps to other communities, and to understanding some of that, to actually having conversations with one another, but also to learning the skills of addressing conflict in ways which are more peaceful, in ways which are about finding solutions. And the people now, two of the people at least employed within that service, are members of the traveller community. You know, so they are people who have progressed through, one of them through a diploma, now doing a master's, working, building trust in the community, but building trust between the community and the guards. You know, so it's a huge endeavour, you know, and I think, you know, that makes me, when you say who the people I work with, you know, I would see part of the work that I do is also supporting those others who are
absolutely,
they're doing it as well. You know?
And that kind of segues to my next question, the travelling community. And I had the absolute opportunity, an amazing opportunity, to go to a Holton site in Ballyfermot, Landon Road, or I can't think of the name of the Holton site, but Eileen Flynn. It was an amazing interview. She's an amazing human being. I love my experience, but when I came out and I talked to people about it, it really opened my eyes to the perception of travelling people and the travelling community, and they're really at the bottom of the social ladder when people talk about it. It's really hurtful. I couldn't get my mind around it. I was aware of it, but not to the extent. She really opened my eyes to how she is perceived in life from the day she's born, from when she went to school, you know, the treatment by teachers. And how do we change that? It feels like we're in the 1920s when it comes to that. Or am I wrong?
No, I think there are very, very strong views. We would have even seen it with the presidential election. You know, things can be thrown out there, and then suddenly, and then more recently, with, I think, with Galway not spending all of its housing budget, that, you know, where it has a housing budget and it wasn't spent, and yet there are traveller families in need of, you know, housing, and so again, there's that sort of struggle that's there between, you know, people who are part of our society, who, yes, have different ways of approaching things on occasion. And often the people they damage most are themselves. I mean, and that's, also one of the things I think is hugely important, is because in part of the conversations that happen, it is that realizing that what there is a there are very, very strong values, and I think what you were describing there with Eileen is that it's really very clearly laid down. But I've equally kind of seen men and women in conversation, traveller men and women in serious conversation. Older women who did one of the programs that we would support in terms of a certificate, a different certificate, but with the ETV, and saying that for them the great pride when their grandchildren sort of said to them, "Where are you going today, Nanny?" "I'm going to school." And then coming back, and even the grandchildren begin to kind of say, "No, we've got to be quiet because Nanny has to do study or homework, or what did you learn today?" And then being able to talk with her grandchildren about that. And then also seeing her husband, who, and this is her story, not my story, but so just saying, as we were just debriefing and talking about some of the changes that had happened through beginning to talk as part of the community about could we do conflict a different way, could we approach this a different way, that would work for us. And finding that her husband, surprisingly, was really capable of putting on the kettle or making the tea, whereas that hadn't been the experience previously. So all that, communities are changing, things negotiating, but family's important, and face is important, as it is for many people, but it's really important. And if something is seen as damaging family, then there is a coming together to protect and defend and attack. And that's a reaction and a response. And it's really interesting talking with my colleagues who, are colleague mediators in the sense of the travel mediation service. Amazing, the work they do, Paddy Point does, in actually bringing things to dialogue, what's needed, what needs to happen, being called in even in those situations where, they'll be asked now more by families. So you're seeing that change as well. So whereas it might have been the guards previously or the courts previously, now families will make contact and say, can we get some help?
Wow.
Now that's really important, because that's people begin to recognise there's the possibility of a different way of doing this. I don't think any traveller parent wants to think of their children being hurt or harmed or dying in a feud that blows up about something and is then gone. I don't think they look for that. I think again we're seeing amazing conversations happening now, but they have been happening within the prison service, and again, great conversations where members of the traveller community are saying, we would like to know more about how to deal with these things differently, so that we don't end up back in here again, or we can talk with members of our family in a different way, so that they don't end up in here. Because do we really want to have our son joining us in here as a cellmate? If there's a different way of dealing with the issues that come up, so again, that's where this power of mediation but again, it's trust building. So within the community, it's really important that people trust that, and that it's being done with them. And that people within the community are building their capacity. It's not me, others going in and sort of saying, we'll sort out your conflicts for you. Because who am I to do that? I mean, I haven't lived that experience, and what I can do is support colleagues and engage as honestly as real as possible with people, as human beings.
Sometimes with any conflict or any kind of when people are being tribal, them and us, we lose that they're human. We forget, they're just the travelling community, or they're just the ethnic minorities or whatever. They're not humans, but they're mums, their dads, their brothers, their sisters. And I sat down with Eileen, and that shined really true to me. And her sister came in, and they were just lovely, human beings. And I was trying to tell somebody this story, and I went, "Oh yeah, that's wonderful. But they used to rob my ma's house and blah blah blah." My son just telling you a lovely story, and you're just giving me some shit with your ma's house being robbed. People from the inner city could have done it. People from
Clondalkin could have done it. You don't know. Oh, no, they
Surprisingly,
were.
people from Sandymount could have done it.
Anyone, you
Or
know.
John Leary, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
but
but
straight away,
labels
the
stop.
travelling community, I was telling this lovely story about a lovely human being that's having difficulties, who's struggling. How can you ignore that?
Absolutely. And I think, again, it's that bit, isn't it, about how we can, you know, begin to just revise some of those stories that people have got in their heads, and, you know, they've been passed down through generations, that when people sit together and the word sort of, you know, traveller comes up, or, you know, it's the same type of thing that, you know, and I went to England as a 12-year-old immigrant, and for the first time in my life, and I always think it's one of the things for me that was really powerful in forming who I am, was that experience, because, you know, I walked from being the same as other white, semi kind of working class, middle class, you know,
Yeah.
where my parents were kind of like the first in their family to almost like own a home that wasn't a council house, you know, that I went to a Catholic school, all girls, and, you know, we had our lovely uniforms and all the rest of it. And I walked in on my first morning at the age of 12 and 2 days into a school where I was one of a small minority of white faces. I was the only Irish person. I was the only person in the school that the teacher could not, sorry, in the class, that the teacher could not pronounce my name.
Wow.
And there were many difficult names, to, you know, in terms of different names. And the people who befriended me and made my time easier in the beginning, and even throughout at different points in time, were the people who were often from, their parents had come from the Caribbean, maybe, or even their grandparents had come from the Caribbean. You know, the people who come, their families who come from India, you know, Turkey, Greece. So I had this amazing, all of a sudden, this amazing cohort of people who were just people, you know, and they were kind, and they were generous, and sometimes they were nasty and vicious, and, you know, but, you know, when I got bullied, and I did get bullied, you know, a few times in school, because I was little and I had a funny accent, and, you know, I had a name that people, you know, and they wanted to call me Treasa, and I would just remind them that actually that wasn't my name. You know, I am Treasa, and they'd look a little bit sort of startled, and, you know, and most of the time that was absolutely fine, and sometimes that wasn't, and yeah. So again, I think that's something for me that I recall at a very deep level, for me, how important that kindness was. That I was another human being. And, you know, and even at times when, you know, I was in different streams for different things and different classes for different things, I could kind of go and talk to any of those people, because sometimes they understood what I was talking about far better than a white English person understood what I was talking about.
Wow.
Or even a white American who was viewed differently to a white Irish person.
Yeah.
So sometimes they understood it in a different way. But that, for me, I think is always at the essence of it, is we are all human, and we are humans talking to other humans, and people's cultures and people's habits and all of those things are all part of our identities. Are our identities so fixed that we can't renegotiate them with ourselves, that we can't learn that perhaps that was something that did work in the 1920s? Maybe that was something, was it?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. When you say that, my stories from my grandmother about the community, where the man who came and kind of basically fixed, mended her pots and sharpened her knives, and was brought in with a cup of tea and the chat and all the rest of it, and given some vegetables, and, you know, they did a bit of a trade on stuff and all the rest of it. And, you know, so that was a very powerful narrative for me as well, was that actually in my family narrative, that was one of them. It wasn't the only one, because there was the other side as well, which was, you best cross over the road now, or lock all the doors, or whatever, you know, because people are in town. And yet the same thing, when I moved back to Ireland initially, would have lived in Tullow, and the people who were so helpful, I can remember they was really helpful, like taking stuff away, like clearing an old house and all this kind of stuff, and sheds and all the rest of it, and very large kind of settled trapper community there and all the rest of it. And they were brilliant, because they, you know, they would come up, and some of the guys that were working there were local construction people, and so they kind of said, look, you know, are you okay? Great, brilliant. But never had that kind of hassle there. Now, when there might be others who came into the area, that was a different issue, because then things might happen. But equally, as you said, Matt, things might happen because there were, some lads from Dublin driving down the car and thought that looks like a house, that looks like it could be accessible. So these things, there's good and bad in every community. And I think within all of us as human beings, there are times when we are really good and kind and compassionate, genuinely, and there are times when we can be biased and blocking. And
absolutely. And I was only talking about this last night to Tuli Mitra down in the Dublin Buddhist Centre, and we were talking about practicing love and kindness meditation at the Bafna. And I used to bring forward people in my meditation that I'd have conflict with, that it'd irritate me. And it was only when I began to look at them as a human being, whether it be a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, or they can hurt, I kind of couldn't be angry at them more. I was kind of going, fuck, these are humans.
They're humans, they are, yeah. And that's a big part of what mediation and restorative practice looks to do. It's the human. It's also the, I sat through the very powerful film like you saw, The Meeting, and that extraordinary situation of a rape victim who said, I want to meet the man who did this. He had been tried and he had served time, and for her that was really important for her, and to hear her story. So again, you're seeing things which can seem really out there, and again, I suppose it's one of the things that it kind of raises my passion around the whole area as well, is around things like the survival check and things like that, and the conversations there, medical negligence. Why are we not having more dialogue with people? Why are we not talking to people? What is it that clicks us in those conflicts into protect ourselves? Organisations protect themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Barristers, lawyers. That against it. Love people in the legal profession. They're adorable and gorgeous, and they absolutely have a role. And yet, so much of the time, what you hear from people is, I would just like someone to tell me what happened.
Yeah. It's what we talked about earlier. People get lost, and it's all about the process, and it's all about the systems, all about the mechanics of it, and the person and the voice and the story is lost in it all.
Absolutely, and that's why, when I was saying,
we don't have open disclosure.
Yeah, so much of the time, people, they want to ask the question, why, what was that about? They, to understand it, they don't necessarily agree with it, and at least they hear what's been happening and what the other person was seeing, and then, perhaps people can transform. There's something that where conflict sort of transforms, and people begin to understand each other from that human level. They come closer. They actually begin to realise that you were hurting, I was hurting, it was difficult. Even within those parenting relationships, that it's hard to let go. It's hard to say I don't love you anymore, and accept you don't love me anymore. And how do we bring up our children, and have those conversations about how we do that? Because and that's so difficult for people, and yet we have to sit respecting the courage it takes for people. I always think of mediation as one of the mediation restorative practice as one of the great courageous acts that people make. They have to trust the person they go into the room to help both of them or a number of people.
And you have to be vulnerable. And you have to show your vulnerability.
Yeah, and people have to be okay with that. Now, there's commercial mediation and other types of mediation, which is much more. It's more about the money. It's more about the money. It's about a contract being broken.
Oh, okay.
That's a perfectly reasonable use of mediation as well. Because again, why would you need to lock into something that then becomes almost like a vendetta against another commercial enterprise when?
Yeah.
Can you sort it? Can you not expend acres of money in court, taking up the court's time, and can you get something that will work better than something that the court is going to give, and then you move down and along through that and closer to the heart of people, and then other forms of mediation are more relational, and I suppose that's a lot of what I do. I do some contractual work, but even within that there's often the hurt, the human hurt, and sometimes the hurt is real, and sometimes it's what we've assumed somebody, so if somebody I had a really good relationship in work with did something that to me said they don't care about me,
And that's only your perception and your assumption, but that's not really what could have
but
happened.
Then I start to look for all of the things, and so if we loop back to what you asked about conflict, we start to look for all of the things that prove they have now become a bad person.
Oh yeah.
And we don't often, because it feels difficult to go and have the conversation, because if they become a demon, then they have big teeth and, you know, claws that they hide very well, but I see them. I see them in the shadows.
Yeah.
Or even just that they won't listen. You know, we convince ourselves there's no point in my saying anything because they won't listen to what I have to say. And maybe they won't, because they will respond from an emotional place. And so again, with mediation, it allows people to come in as whole people to express not only what the story is for them and to have it heard, so another person sits and listens to that without interrupting, which is really hard for people.
Oh, so
because they
difficult.
want to get in there and
Reload,
say that,
reload. Stop listening,
and
judging.
and to talk about the impact, and then the other person gets their chance to do that. So everybody is heard, and then we can start to explore more the specific things that went on, to get some kind of clarity there between people about how that went on and what happened with it and how that worked for each of them, and then looking at it, and so what could be ways to move on from this. I mean, what might help to do that? And then that's where people are so wonderfully creative. I mean, you know, because they so often know that what I need here, you know, I really need to know that person, and often it's that I need to know that person's heard.
Yeah,
What's
absolutely.
happened to me, you know, that's not that often. I mean, I know we kind of talk mediation, but you know, there can't be promises about apologies and things. You know, usually where I say apologies, they're really spontaneous. They're very genuine. They're not genuine. People know they're not genuine. And I never ask a person to apologise just to tick a box that we can get through this. Because what does that mean to anybody?
No,
It's either got to be that someone has heard and understood. They may not have realised the impact their behaviour was having. They may not have realised that actually, okay, they thought I'm doing my job, let's say, because sometimes it's manager or person working with them. I was doing my job. I was, you know, asking that person to do something. Perhaps the way they spoke to them, because they were frustrated, they spoke harshly, and that's what the person heard. Maybe they did that in front of a lot of other people. You know, maybe they lost the rag on something. Maybe they decided, well, you seem to be being difficult to me, so I'm not going to include you in things. And you know, so all of those things can be talked through, understood, and then what now? You know, is the relationship continuing? If it's continuing, how do you renegotiate all of this stuff to go forward?
Yeah.
If it's not continuing, then that's a different situation, because perhaps for people they can at least sit easy with they got the chance
to talk.
They got the chance to say their bit, and they got the chance to hear the other person, as opposed to things coming in the form of letters and massive documents. And
it becomes so complex, but really can be so simplistic.
yeah,
we peel away the layers.
Yeah, and I'm a great believer, you know, that you need a variety of steps. You know, you need that if dialogue doesn't work, then obviously there needs to be some form of judgment about what happens next. And if people can't do that themselves, then they need the support then of their organisation, of the courts, yeah, to do those other things. I think it's where that isn't an opportunity afforded to people. They can lose far more than, you know, they're ever likely to gain from going through those other processes. You know, so there's always that chance for people, that hope. That's what we as mediators are always kind of.
Hope. That's all we have, isn't it?
Well, it is, and even in the big conflicts, you know, it can be very difficult, because you know you're seeing people who are working away at so many levels, and then, like you were saying there, then the story bounces up of that group of people are bad. You know, that label is they're bad. They're all bad. They're bad through and through. Can't be trusted. You know, you've been conned. You know, and yeah, and so then we can feel, oh my God, what's going on here? You know, how come the world isn't moving on? And but again, I think it is about trying to see actually where it is shifting. You know, where there are really important things happening, and you know, really powerful things happening. And I think, you know, as for me, that would be very much, you know, for the university, that it would be a restorative university, for the society we live in Ireland, that it would be a restorative society. And I mean, you know, we have seen these massive shifts in our society, things which would have been huge conflicts in the past, and they're creating the other side of that flip, which is the people who now feel marginalised or outside of what's now seen as the way Ireland is, and the way it will be going into the future. And we have to make sure we don't exclude people there either. That we need to hear that people have a different view, and a different view is okay. Just when that different view is forced down other people's throats, that's where the conflict.
I'm just mindful of the time. We're 11:15. I've got loads of questions I want to ask. I'm like, what will they ask? What will they ask? It seems we're going towards. We've got 15 minutes. Ireland 2019. We're all about equality. We're all about inclusion. We're all about bringing people to the table. I don't know if we're anywhere near as much as we're promoting to say that we are. I think we're having the conversations. We're in our actions within the trenches, within our communities. I don't think we're practicing equality or inclusion. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't think we're doing as much as we need to, definitely.
We talk loads.
We talk a lot. I think there are pockets of real activity. I think one of the, maybe it comes back to what I said very close to the beginning there, was about only connect. I don't think we join the dots a lot.
Oh yeah, I love that one.
So, I just don't think we do that. And I'm a system head, so I have to always say that. So I kind of, I look and I kind of say, if we looked and saw system leaders in Irish society, you would see amazing things going on. You would see people working in local community projects. You would see people, working in restorative projects, working for, Sligo and Galway and over towards the west to become restorative towns, really sort of, this on the ground, the travel mediation service, the family mediation service, all of these, community mediation, people really embracing, sort of, LGBT, gay marriage, all of these amazing things that have come up, the conversations we're having now about domestic violence, coercive control, all of these kind of things which begin to bring up to the surface.
Amazing initiatives. Where are we closing the loop? Are we joining the dots?
And I think that's the kind of bit because one of the risks always is that we are territorial creatures, human beings. So, I think always one of the risks is that we can become territorial. So this is my project or this is my thing. I think also people become focused and busy on what they're doing, and they may not see a project down the road here that actually is, perhaps gives an opportunity to join something together. Again, I think from the government perspective, I think there are things happening that we don't hear about. I mean, I think, they're certainly looking at how enabling voice, for survivors of institutional abuse, that, how this can happen with the cervical cancer, how can we bring people together with where families have experienced sort of murders, that, her name is Clodagh, for example, I thought that was so powerful. But again, it's almost like it needs something really powerful to come up, and then an action is taken. And I think, we do need to, and it probably fits a little bit like, you kind of said about the PhD I did, but I was landscaping workplace mediation, because again, we talk about things in bits, we look at things as a piece of something, and it's just a process.
That's the antecedents, is it?
Yeah, so what is it that actually, where does this come from? Where is this genesis? But also, how does it appear now? And where could it go? What are the things that we need to know and understand? Because if you're so immersed in practice, it's very difficult sometimes to see that actually there's a moment here where we're starting to duplicate something that someone else has already done or is doing. And I think, when it comes to equality, and we hear the conversations that are in the newspapers, the direct provision centres, and are we creating the problems of the future? Are we creating actually situations here? But I think what I get hope from is I hear it being talked about. I hear the voices of people saying that's not okay. That's not okay that somebody who had friends and who was living in direct provision, who died, wasn't told. Those friends were not told that they could go and pay their respects to that person. And we're hearing that. We're hearing those voices out there. And again, yeah, I mean, I would love that actually we made a much stronger commitment as a country that, we are going to focus on.
Join the dots.
And support those initiatives, but bring them together, support them, reinforce, build the scaffolding that's needed to actually sustain the work that's happening, and that we make that commitment that actually genuinely Ireland is the place of 1,000 million welcomes, and that we don't fall into a kind of propaganda message that people who come from elsewhere are a danger to us and a threat to us.
It's not lip service.
Yeah, and that, if our daughter or our son told us that they went to another country and they had to go and live in something that had been built as a hotel in the middle of nowhere, where they were given, whatever it is, or so many euro a week, and an irregular bus service to get into town, and not allowed to cook their own food. Would we be thinking
That's not cool.
that was okay?
No, that's not good. That's not horrible.
And and we can look from here and kind of say, well, actually, we don't like what the current US administration is doing in relation to children and the detention of families and children. And I'm not picking on anybody here. I think it is simply that the conflicts that exist within us as people, we have our biases around things, and
unconscious bias,
and we don't even realize that we are treating another human being in a way that we would find deplorable if it was happening to someone we do view as a human being.
Oh yeah, once we dehumanize someone, you can do whatever you like to them.
Absolutely.
I'm going to mash two questions together. One is, how do you, I get very frustrated when we sit at meetings and I think about the inequalities, or when you're people in conflict. I really feel for them. How do you stop yourself getting lost at sea in all that? And I believe that you're a genuinely caring and loving person. How do you mind yourself? Because I don't see this as a mask. I know we talked earlier about a mask. I find it very genuine, and I can open up to you and I believe you. How do you stop yourself getting lost at sea, and how do you mind yourself?
Pretty good question. A colleague of mine there just recently said something. We were talking about how important compassion is, and being open to people, and not hiding any part of yourself from people. And she said something to me that got me thinking. And she said to me, you have compassion with boundaries. And she said, and I'd love to be able to be like that.
I love that.
And I'm kind of thinking, do I?
Do I? I didn't know.
I didn't know I had
Do you
that.
want to buy it?
Well,
I'll teach you.
What does that mean? I'm kind of thinking to myself, is that a good thing? Is that not a good thing? And again, you had talked there about loving kindness, and I was certainly sort of in my own practice of being open to people, and being conscious that we have to do that. We have to consciously say, I am struggling with the person, or I am struggling with the situation. I now need to, rather than closing myself off, I need to open. But I think with the compassion piece, with being open to people, the main thing I can say is, over the many, many years I've been on this earth, and they are many years now, but of course, 50 being the new 30, I'm fine with that. Or into your late 50s being the new, into your late 30s being that. But the interesting thing for me, Matt, is I try to sit very much honestly with myself, that I can't fix all the problems of the world. Actually, I can't, and no matter how much I would struggle to do that, the energy it would take of me worrying constantly about things, when if I could connect with another person or other people, and together we could see what's possible, seems a better use of that energy. And if I'm working honestly with people, I feel, and I do. I mean, I sit in rooms with people who other people have told me are demons, and I meet another human being who maybe they have behaved badly, maybe they haven't, and they're struggling their way through this. And if they are genuinely wanting to find a solution, I will do everything possible to help them think that through, together, help them think through what they can do. And my boundary, I suppose, is that I don't take that with me. That if they don't get there, what I believe in is that they have had the best possible chance to do that. And that's what I can give. That's what I can offer. I can't offer solutions to every single thing. I can work and connect and support as much as I can anyone and everyone else who's doing really good work with people. And I'd rather use my energy that way. And so maybe that's where my boundaries come from, is that I make choices about that, because I know how much energy I have.
You know where it is enough. You see the line.
Yeah, and I know how much power I have. I have personal power, which we all have.
Yeah. Choice.
But I'm not the government, and I'm not this person. But I might know someone who knows someone who knows someone. But it won't be necessarily my voice. They might be able to get my voice there, but equally maybe it's their voice. Yeah, and maybe if there's enough voices, that that's what we want, is that kind of crescendo of voices building. And so I think for me, that's the way I mind myself. I step into something being very clear that I'm there, and I do that. Like going from if I'm doing mediation, if I'm going into any kind of situation, I will sit for a period of time on my own in my car. I prepare myself. I clear my head of all the other stuff that's there, because I owe it to people not to be bringing
It's fascinating.
my own stuff in, and so I that's my ritual, if you like, for that, because I owe it to people, because that's not fair to bring my stuff in one part of my head when they need me to be listening to what's going on for them and helping them and supporting them in articulating what's possible now, and what's happened and what's possible, and then when people get to a point, it's their transformation and it's their glory and their achievement, and I bask in the light of being in that space, because that's magic. That's magical. Mediation is not magical. The transformation of conflict by the people in the room, that is extraordinary, because the energy that releases that's magic. Because you just feel this extraordinary kind of power of two people or more in now moving out of this kind of sludge of the conflict.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Into this wonderful kind of like standing on a hill and kind of saying, hey, we can go on from here. We can, we're kind of released from what that was for us. And then if they don't get there, the question for me always is, have we done this as well as we could?
Yeah.
And if people make a choice that they're not ready yet to make the change, or that they understand fully what the options are for them and what it means if they can't do it this way, what that means for them, and they understand that, and they've made a wise decision based on being informed as much as possible, then I'll step away from that. And I do, there are moments I have to give myself a good talking to, but I also have colleagues I go to, I have sharing learning sessions with other mediators, I have supervision, I go, I talk it out, because some things do stay with you,
Of course, vicarious trauma,
and we have to mind ourselves in that and recognise that does happen, and always be reflective around that and kind of saying what's going on here.
Brilliant. Before we ride off into the sunset, we're 11:28. What's the one thing you would like people to take away from this interview after listening to you?
I think what I would really, really like people to take away is talk about it. Look for opportunities to talk to other people about things that are a struggle in our relationships with other people. That would be the real thing for me, is think, there's my Irish coming out there now, think talk, first. It's really that, it's think talk first.
Yeah. Wow, we could have talked forever. I had to jump over questions because I was mindful of the time. I hope people got what I got from it. You have an amazing way of empowering people. You talk about connect. It's always the human there. You're genuine, you're loving, you're caring. I'm not saying this to blow smoke up your backside.
Thank you.
There's skills that people, you don't get in academia, you don't get in pracademia, and they will help us through conflict, having the conversation, treating people like they're human beings, caring, think of them like they're your mother, maybe not your mother, you were a killer, not my mother, because she's gorgeous, not your mother, someone else mother-in-law. But when we think of them as a family member, when we put the person forward, we can do good work, can't we?
We can do a lot of good work, and I think we have the opportunity, thankfully.
And you do that. You have a magic thing about you. You empower people. You empower people at meetings. You empower me. You give me lots of confidence over the years that we've worked together, and I know other people are the same. It's brilliant, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you, John. I'm delighted to have you as a colleague.
Well, thank you.
Give us a hug.
Enjoy the pleasure, and hug time. That's wonderful.
You're a legend.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Matt.